So columns are the foundation of almost any Bootstrap layout. They're going to take your design and divide it into vertical groups. That way you don't have to design your own responsive grid. You're going to just use whatever Bootstrap gives you. Now, when you do create a column, you're also going to create a gutter. And the gutters by default are going to be 30 pixels wide. That means that you're going to have 15 pixels on each side of the column. So what you do to create a column is you take an element and you add a class to that element inside a row, and it should follow this format. It should say col dash and then a size, which is 2 letters. We'll talk about them in a minute, and then another dash, and then the number of columns that you want this layout to span, or this element that you're creating. So the size means when the column will convert into whatever you specified in the span into a single column layout. Or in other words, it's going to stack into a single column layout at a specific breakpoint. The breakpoint is going to be determined by this size parameter that you include right here. So you can say, for example, add an extra small size. This 6-column element will convert into a full width element. That's what that's for. Now, the second number is, of course, how many columns you want the element to span. So, as I mentioned, if you wanted to create an element that took up 6 of the 12 columns in the 12-column grid, you would say col dash and then maybe MD for the medium size. And then you would say dash and then 6. That takes up 6 of the columns. So this actually makes more sense when you try it out. So we'll give you an example in just a minute. Of course, if you specify any more than the 12 columns that are in the default grid, any additional columns are going to wrap. And we'll take a look at that in a minute. So the column metrics means that you are going to be working with this specific grid here. So for example, the sizes that you can include in the middle are going to be something like XS for extra small size, anything where the width of your viewport is less than 768 pixels. The SM size is going to be anything that is greater than or equal to 768 pixels until you reach this other breakpoint, 992 pixels. That is called a COLMD, as you can see right here. And anything greater than or equal to 1200 pixels is COL-LG. So you specify the size, and then you would add how many columns you want that to take. And let's go ahead and take a look at what that looks like in practice, because just reading about it is not going to sort of tell you a whole bunch. You just kind of have to experience it. So I'm going to take this section right here, and I'm just going to go ahead and add another div. It's going to have a class of COL and then MD. And then I'm going to say 6. And I'm going to grab my headline and content and just put it in there. So this stuff is going to go right here. And then I'm going to save. And you're going to see that right now, this element, right, looks like it's taken up the full width of the browser. Now that's because at the MD size, the width of the browser has to be at least 992 pixels or bigger. So if the browser is smaller than that, this 6-column element is going to look like it's a 12-column or full width element. So let's go ahead and make this window bigger, and you'll see that at a certain point, it's going to go into its 6-column form. So right here at this breakpoint, notice that now this headline and paragraph are only going to take up half of the width of my grid. Remember, there's a little bit of space over here because this is actually adjusting to the breakpoints, right, based on the container as well. So although it doesn't look like it's maybe taking up exactly half of the width, you can see that it really is, if you take into account that it's going to adjust to those container breakpoints as well. So if we wanted this to always go the full width of the browser, we could just say, hey, at a medium size, I want it to take up 12, although that would be sort of silly because then it would just look like it did before. Let's try another size here. So let's do COLMD, and we will do 2. So that should be 2 columns. And when this refreshes and we get to a certain size, you can see that it only takes up 2 columns for that element. So if we were able to sort of repeat that a few times, let's just go ahead and grab this one and paste a couple of them. We'll do 3. And we'll go ahead and do save. Again, because the window is so small, we can't really tell. If we make this a little wider, you'll see that at a certain point, each one of those is going to take up 2 of the columns, which means that because there's 3 of them, so 2 times 3 is 6. So it's going to take up 6 of the 12 columns. It's got a little bit of gutter in between each of these elements. And so that's how you do layouts. Say that we wanted those to actually go take up all the 12 columns. We would have to make sure that this last number adds up to 12. So because there are 3 of them, it means you would have to make these all 4, which when you do that, you can see that at this size, the layout goes into 3 columns. And then when we make it smaller at whatever that breakpoint is, which is the MD breakpoint, it goes into a single column. So let's see how that would work if we actually change this second parameter right here. So instead of MD, I'm going to use the SM breakpoint here. So I'll save this, and you'll see that now it's adjusting to that 3-column format until we get to a different breakpoint right around here, right? So if we wanted to go and make this always 12 columns, we could include this XS size. So let's go ahead and modify these, and we'll make them XS. That means that no matter what size I make this layout, these are always going to take up 3 columns, and they're sort of going to start scrunching up because this is a single word. It's actually going over our gutters here. And so XS is a way to make the layout always adhere to a certain column width, no matter what the layout would be. So the sizes are XS, SM, MD, and LG. And then you specify the amount of columns. You could do the same thing for a container fluid. So if we just grab all these, let's go ahead and grab these right here. And let's go ahead and modify them first. Actually, we'll go ahead and make them all MD before I switch them. Otherwise, there will always be these 3 columns. So let's grab this one, and we'll copy those columns. And then we'll come down here, and looks like we need a row container here. We didn't create one before. So we would need to do a row and then paste our content. Okay, let's go ahead and save that. And at the medium breakpoint, which will be somewhere around here, it's coming right up. There you go. This one, as well as the other one, go to 3 columns. The difference is because this is a fluid container, it's always going to be 3 columns from here on out and adjust to the width of our browser, no matter what we make it. All right, a couple of tips. It's hard to sort of tell where the breakpoints are, but there is a way of doing this in Google Chrome. If you select Inspect Element, and you've got a pretty new version of Google Chrome, you can hit this little icon right here. This is going to turn on the device profiling, which allows you to take a look at your layout on different phones. You can see that there's a list of models right here. So you can preview this on an iPad, and you may have to refresh your browser. However, what I wanted to show you is that it also has this really handy dandy media query sort of preview right here. If you turn that on, you can actually see the different breakpoints on this layout, and you can see where the different breakpoints for Bootstrap are. And if you click on these, it adjusts the size of the device to that breakpoint. I think we probably need to refresh this page. Sometimes when you turn this on, you really have to do a little bit of a refresh. And then you can actually also pull this in manually. And it's a really nice way of previewing your layout and actually visualizing where the different breakpoints are. So you don't have to remember these numbers. They're sort of hard to remember. You can just sort of click on these previews or go through the pop-up list here and pick a device. So hopefully that gives you a really good idea of how columns work with Bootstrap. They're pretty easy to understand, but it's something that you definitely have to play with. You don't really just want to hear a definition of what the different breakpoints are. You want to sort of test it out yourself and modify these different values to see how they affect whatever you're doing in your page.